again. So I actually don't want to spend much more time talking about delegates. I'd rather... Hold on, there's a reverb. There's a reverb. Okay. It is the spotlight sun. Okay. So check this out. We have a view controller. It inherits from UI view controller. We can tell it should also have the ability to conform to a UI text view delegate. Let's learn a little about UI text view delegate. It's a protocol which defines a set of optional methods you can use to receive editing-related messages for UI text view objects. All the methods in this protocol are optional. You can use them in situations where you might want to adjust the text being edited, such as in the case of a spell checker program, or modify the intended insertion point. It's a whole lot of information. What do we think it does? Rod. It imports some more methods. So what it's going to allow us to do is to delegate the responsibility of those methods to our view controller's delegate. So let's create a delegate. Sorry, it's going to allow us to use the view controller's text field and delegate out the UI text view delegate functionality that it will be able to use. How do you think we can do that? We've got a text field that's already an outlet. What we can do is we can say self.textfield, don't even need text field, .delegate. Whoa. Text fields have an optional value called delegate, which is of type UI text field delegate. Check this out. This is going to be really weird. So, our text field, oh, that's terrible. Our text field, if we give it a delegate, we can just say that delegate is our view controller, because our view controller conforms to the UI text view delegate protocol. What's something we notice about this protocol, though? All right, everyone stand up. Come on. Stand up. Come on. Everybody. Okay. Reach your arms up. Inhale as you reach as high as you can. And then exhale and bring your arms down. Okay. So let's do some learning for like 45 minutes. That's all we have to do. So, our view controller conforms to the protocol UI text view. What do we notice didn't happen when I said this view controller conforms to that protocol? Albert, you want to give it a shot? Okay. Liana.
The stubs did not, you didn't get an error asking stubs as such.
Yeah. We didn't get an error asking us for some stubs, saying, here's how you conform to this protocol. We didn't get an error because if we go and look at it, it says all of the options in this protocol are optional. Sorry, all the methods in this protocol are optional. All of them are optional. Let's take a look at what that means. It's going to be so weird. Available, available, available. Optional, 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 optional. There are all these optional functions that, so we're working in Swift. Swift interfaces with the other language that we create iOS apps in, called Objective-C. Those optional methods come from Objective-C. You might sometimes see them with this setup. Something does that. So there's another keyword saying, here's something we are taking from Objective-C. The languages are not identical. Objective-C was created before iPhones were a thing. So there are some things that our program just straight up steals from Objective-C. Swift says, I don't really have anything like this, but I know Objective-C does. So Objective-C gives us the ability to, Objective-C, for example here, gives us the ability to create optional functions. And all of the methods in our delegate are optional. We never have to use them. We never have to define those methods. We can use them. So let's see. We never have to implement them, though. Let's see how we can do that. Func text field do something in the text field. Okay, so how did we access a delegate? In our view.did_load, we set up the delegate as our view controller itself. How do we use a delegate? What should I type? Again, a delegate is just a property on our top text field, just like a parent was a delegate for a child that gives them food. Sunny? Top text field dot delegate. Great, so we've got this thing called delegate, which is a UI text field. And now let's look at all the stuff we can do. Whoa. So the delegate is handling a whole bunch of stuff. Some of it we saw when we were creating actions. So text field did end editing. Text field should end editing. See a whole bunch of other stuff. But we can use these at various points in our first responder cycle. So if I used my text field and I said, the text field just ended editing. That would be when I stopped giving an input. Let's talk about the verbs in here. Text field did end editing and text field should end editing. What is that similar to in the life cycle lesson we had on Friday? Say it again. Will appear and did appear. Great. So should is the second right before, is the whatever amount of time right before editing in the text field stops. Did is right after it stops. So our delegate here gives us access to those moments in the first responder's use. We could be using it, and then all of a sudden, if we stopped, this function could get triggered. So we can use the text view at like 5 different levels, right? We can interact with its properties. It's got some instance methods. It's got certain instance methods that deal with first responders specifically. And then it can have a delegate that handles different moments in its use. Rob.
So should end editing is right before stop typing?
Yes.
How do you know when I'm about to stop typing?
Don't worry about it.
Whoa, word.
It's, let's just say looking for something to do with the first responder. And you're going to get to test it out. What do you notice about these shoulds and these dids, the return types? Let's talk about the return types, though. Great. So when we talk about the did verbed methods here, those are methods that should probably do something because they're not going to return anything. So text field did begin editing, you'll say what should happen when the text field did begin editing. Same with did end editing and this other implementation of did end editing. Text field should begin editing returns a bool. So right before editing begins in that text field, you'll get a response saying yes or no, it should begin editing. These are weird, right? Jason. Sunny.
Jason.
So that's just a great example of how you can send signals between your delegate and your text field. Jason, Sunny, Sunny, Jason. Great messaging. Yes, Sunny.
How is this different from when you first create an IP action with the text field and have the option to choose like before changing or
So that's using the delegate methods. And now we're just referring to those in code.
so this is just manually typing out what we want the same thing to do.
Mhm. And this way we don't need an action from the view. We could just say, in the code, if this is happening, do that. I know this is a weird one. What are some other questions you have? Yes. Levi. Override function. Yes. Phoenix and then Sunny. Sorry, did you not have a question? Okay, I take it back. Just Sunny.
I didn't have to do all of that. It was fine with just top text field that delegate equals self.
Okay.
That's what the difference in how come you have to write it like that.
Let's see. Cannot assign value of type text field.
Oh, I don't have the optional on top text field. Do I need that?
No, actually you don't. That's such an important point. That's why. Thank you. I don't need the optional. Great. Thank you, Allison. Yes?
And then when you were about to write code with the do something function that you just deleted,
Mm-hmm.
why did you have an optional on the delegate there and not up there?
Over here?
On the delegate itself.
Oh, because let's look at the implementation. So the delegate, which is built into a text field, right? It's a property of the text field called delegate, is defined as an optional UI text field delegate. So whenever I use it, it's still using it as optional because we haven't tried to pull out the value, maybe using optional binding or like forced unwrapping or nil coalescing. So it's just like adding a value to an optional string doesn't give you a string, it gives you an optional string where you have to go and extract the value.
So is that what you're doing now?
So now that I have the delegate, I can use optional chaining here. Like that. Hold on. There we go. So I can chain methods to my delegate. And if you remember with optional chaining, it just says, hey, there might be a value in here. If there is that value, then go ahead and use this function. If not, don't do anything. So I want to use a function that we've already used as an IB action. If you remember, we had an IB action that its job was to handle when I hit return. It does something. On storyboard. Thank you. So when I hit enter within this text view, it did something in the view controller. I can also set that using the delegate. So function let's say I have an action from the button. Come on. Thank you. So I have an action from our button here. That button is button pressed. Let's make sure I have this all set up right. Oh, already got one. Okay, I'm just going to change what's in there. Button pressed. If you remember before, when we pressed the button, it made our top text field become the first responder. That was using a delegate method. You can also say, when it's pressed, that top text field dot delegate dot text field should return. And we can just say top text field. So now when I push the button, it's going to return whatever the action of that is. You guys all right? Okay. So if this thing turns out to be true, then let's say something like label.text is it worked. Else label.text is it didn't work. So this is an action, come on, whose job it's going to be is when we press the button, it's going to trigger whatever the return, whatever happens when we hit return in the top text view. That's weird, right? Yes. When we press this button, what it's going to do is it's going to attempt to return. It's going to occur right before the return actually happens, because we said should is the moment before, did is the moment after. So right before whatever return is actually triggered, this delegate method is going to get called. I know that's a lot of crap. Let's see how it works. There we go. So now when I press the button, it's going to trigger the return button, which should do something else. Oh, crashed. Let's see what the crash is. It didn't like that I tried to call this in this way. Damn. So I forced unwrapped the result of calling something. If let return equal that. Let's try it out. Button. It didn't work. Why not? There's my keyboard. Let's try to figure out what happened here. Because right now I'm kind of stumped in on low steam. Let's look at the definition of this function. Our delegate. Maybe let's look a little into this text field delegate. Text field should return. It's called when the return key is pressed. Return no to ignore. Okay. So that function is something that actually gets called when our return key is called. That's a little different than what I was doing. I was using it backwards. I was trying to press a button to make it return. Does anyone see that? So what I was trying to do is I was using this button incorrectly. I said, when this button is pressed, I want to see the result of someone hitting return. But that's not how this works. This is, you can think of it as like an observer. So your delegate is sitting there and it's saying, hey, FYI, I'm going to wait and see if this is returned. And then, whatever you call on me, I'm going to let that happen. That's weird. Let's look up how to use it. I'm going to go to my friend, Mr. Google. What can I type in here to figure it out? How about how to use text field should return? We can look at the Apple documentation. Declaration. Great, that stuff. Parameters, text field. The text field whose return button was pressed. Return yes if the text field should implement its default behavior for the return button. Otherwise, no. Text field calls this method whenever the user taps the return button. You can use this method to implement any custom behavior. For example, if you want to dismiss the keyboard when the user taps the return button, your implementation can call resign first responder. Cool, that's some helpful information. But let's see how it's used. Nope. I want to do it in Swift. That was Objective-C, so I'm going to type in Swift. How do I capture a tap on the return? The doc says, use this. I'm hung up in the text field part. Okay, this seems like a similar question to ours. Oh, nice. Look, they give us a whole bunch of code. Let's see if it works for us. So they have the protocol, and they are inheriting from a view controller just like us. Great. They have a text field. Great. Then they have a function called text field should return. It takes as an argument some text field, I guess, and returns a bool. The text field now resigns the first responder, and then it just returns true. So before, I was trying to call this function. Instead, all I have to do is, because UI text field delegate is a protocol, all I have to do is implement that function. So in UI text field delegate, the protocol gives you the signature for this function, which is that it takes in a text field and it returns a bool. And all I have to do is the same thing as implementing any other method from any other protocol. I just have to define the method. That's all I have to do. So there's a method called text field should return. Great. I'm just going to make that function. So again, this is just implementing one of the functions in the protocol. And I'm saying, here's what we do. Func, text field should return. And it gives me the format for it, because I got that from the protocol. Give me the blueprint. Now, in here, all this is going to be is it's going to, let's do that thing where we randomly change the background. So self, or view.background color is going to be equal to UI color, where the red is a CG float, CG float dot random between 0.0 and 1.0.
Try to put in something weird at 1.0 where you know, like,
Let's see. CG float with the value 3. So let's just return true. All we are doing here is we are implementing a function that already exists in the protocol. So we conform to this delegate protocol because all of its methods are optional. We don't need them. That's pretty cool. So we don't need them. But we have the option to use any of them if we want. And all I have to do is use them like I would any other protocol method. So just create the definition for that function. So all I'm doing is defining that protocol method text field should return. Now if I run it, let's see if this breaks. Every time I hit it, it changes color. But it doesn't change for this second text field. Does anyone have any idea why? I have not connected it yet. I haven't created an outlet. Let's see if that changes it. Get smaller. I did. Bless you. Okay, let's call this outlet bottom text field. Now let's run it. Cool. So now when I hit enter, in that text field it works. Looks like this doesn't work though. Interesting. So it wasn't just an outlet. What are some other ideas we have? It's not the first responder. What do you mean? Isn't the first text field set up to be the first responder? I think that's in another part of our code. It's not in the implementation of text field should return. Aha. Is it because we set up the first text field with a delegate, but not this one? Right here. Let's see. Bottom text field dot delegate also equals self. Great. So, wink, wink. Before, our text field on the bottom didn't have a delegate, so it couldn't use any of the delegate methods. It couldn't use this text field should return. So now let's run it and see if it fixed everything for us. So the top one works like it should. Cool, the bottom one works like it should as well. So, because the delegate is set as self here, what is self? In this example, what is self? Ian. So in any file where we're creating a new type, what is self? That type. So what is self in this example, Kimball? It's not quite the view. It's the view controller. So self is the instance of the view controller. The view controller implements text field should return. So the delegate looks at self. It looks at self as an example of something that implements the protocol UI text field delegate. And so when we use the delegate of the text field, it goes ahead and it says, hey, there's one of those protocol methods. There's one of those delegate methods. Once the delegate for those text fields has been set to be self, aka this view controller, then each of our text fields can use that delegate method text field should return. Rod. So it's something that just sits there and waits for a text field to be returned. And so, how does that happen? Because it's a method in self. And we said the delegate is self. Method, the functions. Yes. So if you set your delegate to self, which is the view controller, then the delegate methods that you want to use, so the methods from the protocol that you want to use, are available to your text fields because it's just looking at self. It's looking at the implementation of the function from the protocol. That's what our delegate's job is to do. It's to look at these implementations from the protocol UI text field delegate and then try to use them. It's just like any other protocol method. If you remember from comparable, the protocol comparable, you could define what happens when you make a comparison between your types. So if you conform to comparable, what you have to do is tell your program what happens with the less than sign. You tell it literally, here's what happens with the less than sign. In the same way, you tell your program here, here's what happens when I hit return in a text field. This is a function on the view controller. It's an instance method, just like any other instance method we've seen before. So for an instance of UI view controller, self gives us access to this text field should return. The delegate goes, it tries to look at whatever self is, which is the view controller, and then it tries to use this implementation of text field should return.
Sorry.
Yes.
What's that called again when
In the protocol itself, those are the function signature.
There we go.
Yeah.
So text field should return the signature.
So
And the UI.
everything,
text field delegate.
everything up to here is the signature that you would see in that delegate protocol. And then inside of the block of code is your implementation of that function. Rod.
So as long as the text field not delegate is set to itself, any delegate related methods that are going to be working automatically.
So they're not going to be working unless you define them, because in this specific protocol, all of the methods are optional, right? We didn't get that thing saying to conform, you need to use these protocol stubs. So only the ones that you define here matter. So let me just go back to our viewDidLoad. Hard and fast rule for right now. If you want to use the text field delegate, then have your view controller conform to that protocol, and then set the delegate for your text fields equal to self, so that your delegate can go and look at self for any of the instance methods that it's implementing from the protocol. So if you want to use the delegate on the text field, just set delegate equal to self and start defining all of those protocol methods from that protocol. So if you need to use it, that's the first step. Delegate equals self, and then look up what's in that delegate and implement those. Yeah.
So is this something that backend like protocol and extension? Or not?
No, this is more like when we were just dealing strictly with protocols. Like, this is the actual implementation of the thing that the protocol only has a signature for. Right. We didn't change. The extension is used when we want to change the protocol and say there's a specific implementation of this that we want. Right now, we don't have to worry about that because we actually defined it here. I know this is really weird, but I don't know, it's kind of cool too. So what this text field should return is doing is it's doing the same thing as this IB action, hit return in text view. I don't need that action now. Instead, I could just have any text view that has its delegate as self do the stuff in text field should return. I don't need this action. So it's probably a better idea, because you can be much more explicit about what you're doing, to use this delegate method. You can still use the action if you want, but there are a ton of different actions that can come from our text, should be text field, sorry. There are a ton of different actions that can come from that text field, right? You had like touching it, you had hitting return, you had resign first responder, all these things. So rather than using IB actions, you could say, in this view controller, for anything that uses this view controller as a delegate, where that delegate is of type text field delegate, then all of those things will do this. So if you had 95 text fields in this view controller, and all of them used self as their delegate, they would all use the return key in this specific way. You don't have to create an action for all of them. Right. Is there anything else you could set delegate to? Yeah, if you had any other object that conforms to the protocol UI text field delegate. So self is a thing that conforms to this protocol. And that's why it has access to those protocols methods. If you had any old other thing, then you could use that as the delegate as well.
So like a model that inherited from that adopted.
Yes, exactly. If you had another type that conformed to that protocol. I have to go to a meeting for the rest of the day, and the coffee machine's broken. Oh no. I will put this up on